What's up YouTube, Capital G here talking about the newest Yu-Gi-Oh! Structure deck that just got revealed and how disappointed and furious I am with this announcement. So if you guys don't know, and this was just posted like a day or so ago on the official Yu-Gi-Oh! OCG website, and if you guys can't read Japanese, YG Organization has been so kind enough to go ahead and translate this. Soul Burner is going to be getting his own structure deck. In fact, the structure deck is named after the character. It's called Structure Deck Soul Burner. If you guys aren't familiar with Yu-Gi-Oh! Reigns, the current anime series, he's a character who appeared in season 2. He plays an archetype called Salamangreat. I didn't talk about it on this channel at all for various reasons, to be honest. I'll talk about that in a little bit, but basically the entire new structure deck is going to be focused on him and obviously his archetype Salamangreats. Now, one of the reasons I didn't talk about the archetype was because I was just incredibly disappointed by it. I'm not actively watching Yu-Gi-Oh! Reigns, although that's about to change. A lot of people kind of told me, and from what I had heard about Soul Burner as a character, is that he kind of hit the show like a motherfucking gangbuster. He was dueling a bunch of main characters. He was beating people left and right. This dude was basically the shit. And then I was like, okay, that's obviously pretty cool. His new archetype was coming out in Soul Fusion, which, you know, obviously Soul Burner, Soul Fusion. I think the set is named after him as well. I was pretty excited about his archetype, and then I actually looked at the Salamangreat cards and I was like, wow, this is insanely underwhelming. Now maybe Salamangreats will end up being something, you know, really good as Goki were, and I actually feel like this is kind of Konami saying we want Salamangreats to be a tier 1 deck. Whether it actually comes to that, who actually knows? Maybe some of these cards will end up being OP, but really when I looked at his archetype, it wasn't even just that I thought it kind of sucked. It felt like a very underwhelming anime deck. You guys know how a lot of times in the anime the characters will play like really bad cards when obviously there are like much better cards that do the same thing, and they make like unnecessarily risky plays, and a lot of times they combine all of their resources into like one monster and have no backup plan. The archetype just kind of felt like that, and it was kind of jarring, especially considering that in this Reigns era, well, again, if you don't watch the anime, maybe this won't hit home with you, but a lot of these archetypes that we are playing right now in the competitive meta, whether it be Goki or Altergeist or Trickstar, these are anime character decks. Konami and Jerome McCall even said this, they are making a legitimate effort to make the anime decks like really strong, although Rockets was, you know, probably a little bit of a failure. But then I looked at Salamangreats and I was just like, wow, this archetype seems really just bad, and it's ritual based, and I believe that people say that Soul Burner also fusion summons. He's supposed to have like a super poly type card that lets you use resources from both sides of the field. Overall, I'm not really excited about his archetype, but the real big problem that I'm having with Konami giving Soul Burner basically like a structure deck right off the break, because I assume we'll probably be getting this sometime around February. After Zombie Horde comes out, we're going to be getting this structure deck. It's basically the next in line. The real problem that I have is Konami is just spamming us with these fucking Cyberse structure decks. Like, if you guys realize this, and many people in the Yu-Gi-Oh! Community have started talking about this, because at this point everybody is noticing, and I can't even just ignore it anymore. I basically have to address it. If you look at just the most recent structure decks, so let's just look at the last 4 structure decks that we've gotten in the TCG. So we have Power Code Link that just came out a couple of weeks ago. We had Lair of Darkness that was released in the spring of this year. We had Wave of Light Counter Fairies that was released early winter, January of this year. And then we have last year's Cyberse Link. Now I get wanting to, you know, it moved the players on to the Cyberse type because Yasaku plays it in the anime, but don't you think it's freaking ridiculous that 50% of our last 4 structure decks have been Cyberse based? And even if you're thinking, Cap G, it's really not all that bad because we're getting a nice little reprieve when we get Zombie Horde in a couple of months in November. Okay, that's nice, until you realize that right after Zombie Horde, guess what we're getting? We're getting structure deck Soul Burner, and if you haven't realized by now, Salamangreats, which is the archetype that Soul Burner plays, this archetype is completely Cyberse based. So essentially we're getting another Cyberse structure deck shoved down our fucking throats, and it's like, no one wants these damn Cyberse cards, Konami. Like, give us something else at this point. I mean, one of the problems that I'm having with, I guess, the Reigns era as a whole, and don't get me wrong, I like the Reigns era so far, but it's really the fact that Konami is so heavily focusing on this type, and you know that it's because of the anime. It's the fact that a lot of characters in the anime play the Cyberse type, and the fact is the main character, Yasaku, he plays them. Now, if you look at other eras of Yu-Gi-Oh, right? It's not like other eras of Yu-Gi-Oh! Didn't have new mechanics and a whole bunch of new stuff to push, and Konami did it in a much more subtle and better way, in my opinion. When Arc V first started, and we got what was that? Duelist Alliance was the first set. Konami introduced the Worm archetype, and the Worm type into the game, and they kind of kicked that off with like Yang Zings, and throughout that era we had other ones like the True Kings, and what's another one? Like the True Dracos, but you never felt like Konami was just completely trying to make Worms take over the game or forcing us to play Worms. It's like, all right, here's a tier 1 Worms archetype. Couple sets later, or maybe like a year later, here's another tier 1 Worms archetype. And that was pretty much just it. They did it in a very, I guess, just intuitive way. If you go back to 5Ds when Konami introduced the Psychic type into the game, I mean, yeah, with the first set, the Duelist Genesis, they put a whole bunch of psychic stuff in there, like Krebons and Emergency Teleport. That's where Teleport Dark Arm Dragon came from and got its name from, was, the teleport plays with like Krebons, but you never felt like they were force feeding it down our throats, like they were saying, you motherfuckers better play these damn Cyberse cards. And I really feel like Konami is trying to do that right now with every other structure deck basically being a Cyber structure. And really, I have to say, I'm not even the biggest fan when it comes to anime structure decks, especially if they focus around the main character of the anime, because a lot of times the archetypes that the main characters play are just terrible. I mean, yeah, they're really flashy for the show, but when it comes to like the competitive Yu-Gi-Oh game, they never really actually do anything. Now, Yuya from Yu-Gi-Oh! Arc V, like if you ever seen that show, he was a complete outlier. He is the biggest exception to the rule. He played like his Zark Magicians, his regular Pendulum Magicians, his Performer Pals, like everything that kid played on the show ended up like fucking becoming meta. He was the exception to the rule. But generally speaking, the main character doesn't play very good cards. And if you look at how Konami does this, a lot of times the main character ends up getting 2 structure decks and 2 starter decks, as Yosaku has already had. Not exactly the biggest fan, but I understand why Konami does it, because they're trying to appeal to the masses. They're trying to appeal to the biggest demographic. And the reason that the characters from the anime usually get the structure decks is because those are the ones that the kids are watching when they watch the anime and they see the cards are constantly being played. Like, yeah, Konami could make a Lunalight structure deck or a Tellarknight structure deck, but that would only make Cap G happy. Like, who the fuck else would buy a Lunalight structure deck except me? Konami has to go for the dollars. They're going for the biggest audience that they can possibly get. I mean, let's be real. Why couldn't they make this structure deck like Revolver? Why couldn't they make it, a Revolver structure deck? I mean, obviously Konami tried. I think that they legitimately tried to make Rockets a good deck. The fact that they all float upon destruction, I mean, generally that's how you end up with a tier 1 deck. Rockets were they were too damn slow in my opinion. Like, they didn't float until the end phase, and honestly, who the fuck wants to wait until the end phase when Gokis float like automatically? Even Burning Abyss and some of the other decks from like Art V, like Yang Zings, they all float immediately. Konami could have easily went back to Revolver. He was a huge character in season 1. Obviously, he was like one of the most popular characters on the show with some of the best boss monsters on the show. They could have obviously tried to go back to Revolver. They could have maybe fixed the archetype, given them like 4 or 5 really amazing cards, tried to make it tier 1. But the reason that they're going to Soul Burner is because he's the future of Reigns. Like, he's going to sell the cards now because he's actively on the show. He's actively like dueling and kicking people's ass right now. So I don't know. I mean, I'm not gonna lie, maybe his archetype will be similar to Goki, where when Goki first came out, yeah, they were kind of crappy and a lot of people weren't too excited, and then eventually they got Isolde, they got some good Link monsters, and we see what they can do now. Maybe Soul Burner's archetype will end up being like that, but I'm just not very excited about the Salamangreats, and at this point, I just have Cyberse fatigue. I feel like Konami just needs to stop trying to shove this archetype down our throats. Either make a couple of good archetypes just in some of the booster sets and make them good, or just, fucking give up on it. I don't know, man. Just because the main character in the anime is playing it doesn't mean it has to translate into like a good competitive. They don't have to be like good and competitive in real life Yu-Gi-Oh! For the most part, all of the anime characters play shitty decks that really no one plays outside of, I guess, Jaden's, like E-Heroes, but those eventually eventually, like the ones that he played on the show were not the ones that ended up becoming like meta. So you guys let me know what you think. Are you excited for Structure Deck Soulburner? I'm not excited at all, unless these cards are absolutely amazing, or I am just completely wrong about Salamangreats. I will not be picking this up. I feel like they definitely should have picked Revolver for this, because Rocket still had a little bit of potential, and they could have really done something with that archetype. But at this point, you guys let me know what you think in the comment section below. Thank you guys for watching. As always, subscribe if you have not already, and turn on that notification bell for daily videos.